before Mussolini's body hung upside down in a Milan gas station. Spat on by crowds who once feared him, he had already destroyed 2 lives in silence: his first wife and his eldest son. Both erased, both killed, and the world never knew. You think you know Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy, one of the closest allies of Adolf Hitler, the man who marched on Rome and seized power. But there's a chapter of his life so dark, so carefully buried, that even today most history books skip right over it. This isn't about battlefields or propaganda. This is about a woman who loved him, gave him everything, and paid with her sanity. This is about a boy who carried his father's name and died because of it. This is about how far a dictator will go to protect an image. And when you hear what Mussolini did to his own flesh and blood, you'll understand that some monsters don't just rule nations. They destroy families first. If you're here because you want real history, the kind that doesn't get taught in schools, you're in the right place. Darkroom Archive digs into the stories that power tried to bury. So hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will change how you see one of history's most infamous figures. Let's go back to 1909. Mussolini wasn't a dictator yet. He was a troublemaker with big ideas and empty pockets. He'd already been kicked out of Switzerland for organizing violent strikes and dodged military service. He was a school teacher turned journalist, bouncing between jobs, always talking about revolution, always looking for the next opportunity. Ida Dalser. She was 20 years old, beautiful, ambitious, the daughter of a small-town mayor who'd moved to Milan and opened a French-style beauty salon. She was exactly the kind of woman who attracted the city's wealthy elite. And somehow, this fiery young socialist journalist caught her eye. We don't know exactly when they met. Maybe in Trento, where Mussolini worked briefly, maybe in Milan. But what we do know is this: Ida fell hard in love with Mussolini. She didn't just fall in love with Mussolini, she believed in him. When he told her he wanted to start his own newspaper to push his political vision, she didn't hesitate. She gave him money. Then more money. Some accounts say she sold her entire salon, the business she'd built from nothing, just to fund his dream. Think about that for a second. She gave up everything. In 1914, they were married, or at least that's what the documents suggested before they vanished. By 1915, Ida gave birth to a son. She named him Benito Albino Mussolini, a boy who would grow up knowing his father's name, but never his father's love. But here's where the story takes its first cruel turn. While Ida was pregnant, Mussolini had already moved on. He was involved with another woman named Rachele Guidi, and before his first son was even born, he married her. 2 wives, one expecting his child. The other, now his official wife, Ida, was pushed aside, forgotten. A footnote Mussolini hoped would disappear, and for a while she stayed quiet. She raised her son, she waited. Maybe she thought he'd come back. Maybe she thought once he achieved his dreams, he'd remember them, but she was wrong. By 1922, Mussolini was no longer a struggling journalist. He was leading 25,000 black shirts in the March on Rome, forcing the king to appoint him prime minister. He became Il Duce, the leader. Fascism was on the rise. Italy was his, and with power came paranoia. Mussolini knew scandal could ruin him. Italians respected strength, but also cherished morality, family, and tradition. If anyone discovered that their new prime minister was a bigamist who abandoned his first wife and son, it could destroy his image. So he did what dictators do. He erased them. Police began following Ida. Government agents kept tabs on young Benito Albino. Every marriage certificate, every document, every birth record that connected Ida and her son to Mussolini was destroyed. But Ida refused to disappear. She started showing up at fascist offices. She demanded recognition. She told anyone who would listen that she was Mussolini's rightful wife. She called him a traitor. Claimed he'd taken bribes from the French government during World War I to push Italy into the conflict. Whether that was true or not didn't matter. She was dangerous. She had proof. She had a son who looked like Mussolini. She had memories, letters, documents that hadn't been found yet, and Mussolini couldn't risk it. In 1926, Ida Dalser was arrested. Not for any crime, not for any real reason. She was simply taken. Witnesses said she was beaten, tied in a straitjacket, and declared insane by doctors under government orders. She spent the rest of her life locked inside mental hospitals, moving from one facility to another, screaming that she was Mussolini's wife, that she had a son, that someone needed to listen, but no one did. She died at the age of 57. In 1937, the official cause, brain hemorrhage. But, let's be honest, she was silenced, whether through neglect, mistreatment, or something more deliberate. Ida Dalser was eliminated because she told the truth. And now Mussolini had one problem left. His son, Benito Albino Mussolini, grew up in boarding schools. He was told his mother was dead, a lie that must have shattered him when he learned the truth. In 1931, at just 15 years old, he was adopted by a former fascist police chief. Not out of kindness, but to control him. Mussolini needed eyes on the boy at all times. Benito Albino wasn't allowed to use his real surname. He was ordered to call himself Bernardi, forbidden to call Mussolini his father. But he knew, and he wouldn't stop saying it. He told his classmates, his teachers, anyone who would listen, that he was the son of Il Duce, and that made him a threat. When he came of age, Benito Albino enlisted in the Italian Royal Navy. He served during World War II, stationed on ships, doing his duty like any other sailor. But even at sea, government agents watched him. He kept talking, kept claiming his birthright, and eventually that sealed his fate. After his service, he was arrested, not for treason or desertion, but for telling the truth, and just like his mother, he was declared insane. He was sent to Mombello Asylum in Milan, the same type of institution that had swallowed his mother. And inside those walls, something horrific happened. There are two versions of how Benito Albino Mussolini died. Both are chilling. Some accounts say he was killed by coma-inducing injections, essentially a medical execution. Doctors gave him a lethal dose disguised as treatment, and he simply never woke up. Other sources claim he was subjected to repeated electric shock treatments. His body convulsed under the voltage until his heart gave out. Either way, the result was the same. In July 1942, at just 26 years old, Benito Albino Mussolini was dead. He was buried in an unmarked grave. No ceremony. No acknowledgement, but forgotten. There's no way this wasn't ordered from the top. Doctors don't kill patients, especially the son of the sitting dictator, without authorization. The fascist government wanted him gone, and Mussolini let it happen. Or, more likely, he commanded it. Think about for a second for this cold calculation required for that decision. Your own son? A boy who did nothing wrong except be born. A boy who only wanted to be acknowledged by his father. And instead of love, instead of recognition, he got a hospital bed and a death sentence. This wasn't just neglect. This was an execution. 1 year later, in July 1943, Mussolini's reign collapsed. He was captured, executed, and hung upside down in Milan, the same city where his son died. I've already made a detailed video on Mussolini's execution and how his downfall unfolded. If you haven't watched it yet, check the link in the description. But even in that moment of justice, the world didn't know about Ida, didn't know about Benito Albino. The son and the wife who were killed in silence remained forgotten. This story isn't just about Mussolini being evil. We already knew that. It's about how dictators operate, how they control narratives, how they erase inconvenient truths, how image matters more than humanity. Mussolini built his power on the idea of strength, tradition, and Italian pride. But behind the propaganda was a man who abandoned his wife, denied his son, and ultimately ordered both of their deaths to protect his reputation. Ida Dalser and Benito Albino Mussolini weren't casualties of war. They were victims of ego, of ambition, of a man who valued power over everything else. So the next time you see Mussolini in a history book, standing next to Hitler, giving speeches, leading armies, remember the boy in the asylum. Remember the woman in the straitjacket. Remember the lives destroyed not by war, but by a father's refusal to acknowledge his own blood. History is full of monsters, but some of the worst crimes happen in silence. In hospitals, in unmarked graves, in stories that powerful men hope will stay buried forever. But not anymore, because now you know. And that's why we do this at Darkroom Archive, to make sure the victims aren't forgotten. To make sure the truth comes out, no matter how dark it is. If this story hits you, subscribe to support the channel and share the video. Let people know. Because Ida and Benito Albino deserve to be remembered. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.